Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth.
Hello and welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. I'm your host, Moses Brattrud, with Grace Evans. We have breaking news for you this afternoon on the Family Beacon podcast. Grace, fill us in.
I am officially a college senior, Moses.
What?
That was a fist bump,
but that's
I can't
so
believe
cool.
it, honestly. So this morning at 8 a.m., I took my last final, Moses, and let me tell you, it was on systematic theology, and I'm not a systematic theologian. And I went into it, and when I first started, I was like, I'm gonna fail this. But then I submitted it, and a lot of it was multiple choice. And guess what? I got all of the multiple choice questions right.
You got your grade back already?
Well, I got all the multiple choice questions. There's a few essay questions, but I always do final essay questions, so I might have aced that final.
Wow.
And I am not a systematic theologian.
Nice.
Thanks.
Okay, fist bump again for that.
So
that's so
the
exciting.
breaking news.
Yeah.
I can now officially be full-time. I'm so pumped.
Yes, Grace will be full-time with Minnesota Family Council, which means more great content from us. Mm-hmm. I should also say congratulations to our other, all of our graduating seniors and other kids who are just done with another year of school, especially our videographer, Jack Bittner, who has finished all his in-person classes at the University of Northwestern, just one more class to go before graduation online. So we're really proud of you, Jack, as well, and grateful for your work.
I have let my hair down, as Moses said. He walked in today and he was like, Grace, you let your hair down. And I was like, does it look bad?
She didn't know what the phrase meant.
And he was like, no, you've chilled out a little bit. And I was like, yeah, well, I was dying for like 3 weeks.
This sounds like I'm like so ultra critical of you most of the time, which is not true.
I'm a little bit critical, I feel like I'm more critical of you.
I feel like that as well, and I'm sure that's going to shock our audience.
Anyways, that's the breaking news for you guys. Okay. However, we also have some actual news to talk about today, right, Moses? So Moses is great at following elections. It's one of his hobbies, and he's also just really great at it, and that's good because it's part of his job. But recently, the GOP convention, the 22 GOP convention was held, right, Moses? And I know that you tracked it pretty closely. Can you tell us when it was held and where it was held?
Absolutely. So this is a big deal. It's kind of like the kickoff event for the political year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we have the midterm election coming up this fall. So the question facing the GOP delegates when they met in Rochester this past weekend is which candidates, specifically for statewide office, are going to receive the endorsement of the party. So that's governor, the Secretary of State, Attorney General, and State Auditor. The convention does other things, but those were the main things. So let me just so then there ended up being 9 different ballots, but they eventually did decide on a candidate. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, I saw that there were a lot of ballots, like a lot of different rounds. How exactly does that work? Yeah,
well, there were 9 rounds because essentially this is for the gubernatorial race. Mm-hmm. For like state auditor, there was one candidate and he was just endorsed right away. But for governor, there were so many candidates at the convention and lots of supporters, so they had to keep doing these ballots. And the way that it worked is they were voting electronically, the delegates, and the delegates were chosen at the local conventions. Mm. And the candidates for those were chosen at the BPOU convention, the BPOU meetings, which I did go to, and then I stopped participating.
What is BPOU?
BPOU stands for Basic Political Operating Unit. I don't know if other states do that, or even if I'm not sure that the Democrats do that here in Minnesota, but that's what the Republicans call their smallest unit of political organization.
And you went to those meetings?
I did go to the one. I did go to the one in my area. So, but then then there's various events, and I just had a baby, so I didn't go.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have been a delegate. Who knows?
You probably could have been, honestly,
convention. That would have been fun. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, the delegates are pledged to support various candidates, but I think that they're only pledged to support that candidate on the first ballot.
Okay.
So Paul Gazelka has this many pledged delegates, and Scott Jensen has this many pledged delegates, and then they see what the count is, and that's the first count. And then now for each of the candidates, if they get less than 20% of the vote, they are eliminated, and they don't have to drop out of the race, as we'll see, but that generally means that they have less of a chance doing so. Going into the convention, most people would have said that the leading candidates were Paul Gazelka, state senator, Scott Jensen, former state senator, physician, and Kendall Qualls, former candidate in Congressional District 3 and a businessman in private practice.
And we talked about it on the podcast before.
Yes,
we
have.
Of Take Charge Minnesota.
Yeah, so he's been really strong on that issue. So those were the strongest candidates going into the convention.
Yep. And so how did the convention go, and which candidates ended up being endorsed, Moses?
There's always so much drama. And
yeah, of course. I mean, that's the thing with politics, honestly. It's exhausting sometimes.
It is exhausting, and it's such a horse race. And there was, of course, the Democrats, the Republicans actually endorsed a candidate, which I thought was a victory. Whereas, but of course, the Democrats released a press release saying chaos at GOP convention. And I'm like, well, there was some drama, but I'm not sure there was chaos. This is just how politics works. The people have strong feelings. And so with the gubernatorial candidates, Paul Gazelka was eliminated relatively early on, which I was surprised by that.
Yeah, I'm very surprised by that.
And then so people like Mike Murphy and Neil Shaw, all of these candidates were at our debate in December. They actually kept going and kept going further. And so then it becomes really important for those candidates for them to be courted by the bigger candidates like Scott Jensen and Kendall Qualls. And they are asking Neil Shaw and asking Mike Murphy, hey, I have your support if and when you drop out of the race. So that's what eventually happened. I think both Neil Shaw and Mike Murphy endorsed Scott Jensen, and that helped Scott Jensen become the endorsed candidate after 9 rounds, even though Kendall Qualls had actually been ahead up until that point. So, and then for Attorney General, Mike Schultz was endorsed.
For our audience, can you just explain really quick what Attorney General is? Because I know our attorney did a video on this, but just in case.
That's right. Yeah, Attorney General it's not to mention all these other state offices. It falls below under our radar a little bit. Is our state's chief law enforcement officer. Not really in charge of the police as much as, not in Minnesota anyway, more in charge of keeping our state safe, for example, from companies that are predating upon Minnesotans, things like that, filing and defending the state in court if the state is sued, things like that. The current Attorney General is Keith Ellison. Unfortunately, he's very pro-abortion, which has been really bad. So Mike Schultz was endorsed for the Republican candidate for Attorney General, for State Auditor Ryan Wilson, and for Secretary of State Kim Crockett. Which has been interesting.
Yeah.
There's been some stuff about her.
Tell our audience about the allegations that Kim Crockett has received regarding some anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, question mark?
Yeah, so Kim Crockett, first of all, I never met her.
Okay.
And I want to say that we're going to talk about this, but we're not making any accusations. And Kim, if you're listening, Ms. Crockett, we would like you to come on the show, and you'll have the chance to explain to our audience what you meant by this. As far as I know, she has not released a statement on this. So there was a video, I believe it was played after her endorsement was made official, and at the end of the video, there's this image of the Jewish billionaire George Soros, and he's kind of like a puppet master holding the strings over everything else that's going on.
Oh.
And now, George Soros is not a great guy. He has given billions and billions of dollars to left-wing causes, pro-abortion, et cetera, and people really dislike him. But so it's okay. It's very totally fine for people to, attack George Soros or any other billionaire who's involved in politics. They are asking to be attacked. But this really reminded some people of certain tropes that were used by the Nazis and other anti-Semites to say that basically the Jews are controlling everything since George Soros is Jewish. So the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas had a statement condemning this. And I want to say just an hour ago I saw that the chairman of the GOP released a statement about this. So he said that As discussed with the JCRC, I have concluded after talking with Ms. Crockett that the depiction of Mr. Soros was not intended as anti-Semitic, and that neither Ms. Crockett nor her creative team were aware that the depiction of a puppet master invokes an old but persistent anti-Semitic trope. So, we're giving Ms. Crockett the benefit of the doubt and taking her at her word that she did not intend this to be anti-Semitic, wasn't aware of the anti-Semitic connotations there. It's an unfortunate thing when you've been endorsed, and it should be like this really positive moment, the kickoff for her statewide campaign. And so, I hope that she addresses that and is able to move forward with her campaign, hopefully pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing that's interesting is that before the convention, Scott Jensen chose Matt Birk as his running mate. And Matt Birk is, I should know more, but he's a former football player. I think he's a former Viking who lives in Minnesota. He seems like a great guy. And there was some remarks that he got in hot water over. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So he, again, Scott Jensen's running mate, he's very explicitly pro-life, as is Jensen, actually, which is really encouraging to see both having some strong pro-life campaigns being the nominations for the Republican Party. But recently, Governor Tim Walz sent out a fundraising email. And in the fundraising email, he takes stabs at candidate Birk. He said, this is an email that he sent out. We'll have a screenshot on the screen right here. Breaking, in a newly uncovered video clip, Republican-endorsed candidate for Minnesota Governor Scott Jensen's running mate, Matt Birk, is seen making deeply insensitive comments about rape victims. Speaking at an anti-abortion event in 2020, Birk says, abortion is not going to heal a rape victim. It will only make things worse.
Which is just true.
Which is true. And then Walz's fundraising email goes on to say, team, with the Supreme Court poised to overturn Roe v. Wade this summer, which it is, it has never been more important to re-elect Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan so that they continue holding the line on abortion rights in Minnesota. And then they do their plea for money. So basically what the Walz-Flanagan team, Walz is running with Flanagan, their team is trying to fundraise off of abortion, off of the victimization, or off of the oppression of women and children. That's what they're trying to fundraise off of. And they're trying to paint candidate Birk as this bad person for standing up for the unborn. And again, the statement that they pulled from Birk was, abortion is not going to heal a rape victim. It will only make things worse. There's nothing bad about that. And I think that time will really tell to see if Minnesotans are going to get behind this and are actually going to support the Walz-Flanagan campaign with this. I mean, recently I saw a poll sent out by Alpha News, and they did a poll on Minnesotans, and the headline was, just 3 in 10 Minnesotans believe abortion should be legally permitted with no restrictions. So that's pretty encouraging. Minnesotans are pretty divided on Roe v. Wade, and I guess we'll see, what happens with this fundraising attempt. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't think that that's a very good look for the Walz-Flanagan campaign, personally. And I did some digging just on Matt Birk's position on the pro-life, or his other comments on the pro-life position, because I thought it was interesting just to see exactly how pro-life is he. So one website called abetterminnesota.org, I can have a screenshot again of the article right now, but it claims Matt Birk will bring a Texas-style abortion ban to Minnesota. In 2013, Birk was exposed for his extreme anti-choice politics and even refused to attend a White House event with his NFL teammates because President Obama supported a woman's right to choose. He's vocally anti-choice, and with conservatives in the legislature threatening to bring a Texas-style abortion ban to Minnesota, the Jensen-Birk ticket would be catastrophic for reproductive rights.
Sounds great.
That's the thing. I read that and I was like, you think this is like this article is making so many good points. You know what? I'm just sitting here like, you can reframe the narrative and use these terms anti-choice and reproductive rights, but in reality, what the Jensen-Birk ticket is doing is fighting for the most vulnerable. From Birk's website, he talks about how from his campaign website, which we'll have also on the screen right here, he talks about how he knew he was pro-life after cradling his firstborn son.
Wow.
And that he has been a pro-life activist for years. He's also Catholic, so his Catholic faith does inform that. It informs him to fight for the preborn. And he often goes to March for Life rallies. And as lieutenant governor, he hopes to drive policy decisions which, quote, will reduce and eliminate the eradication of babies, which predominantly impact the Black community in Minnesota. And I think that's a really good point to put on there. And I am glad that he's calling that out, because it's absolutely true. We've talked about that on the podcast before, of how Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers do target the Black community. I mean, even recently, Planned Parenthood tweeted out, it's statistically safer if you're a Black woman in America to get an abortion than to give birth. I mean, what's more racist than that, honestly?
Yeah,
that's extremely racist. And they've tweeted out lots of stuff like that before. So good on Matt Birk for calling that out. So all in all, it really does seem like a strong pro-life ticket for the Republican Party, which is really encouraging to me. And yeah, I just hope they talk about this issue more, because it really is important. And a lot of Minnesotans are watching this issue right now with Dobbs v. Jackson.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed, we're talking about the possibility that Minnesota's abortion laws will actually matter, that we can take action at St. Paul that would protect children instead of having any pro-life laws we pass be immediately made irrelevant by Roe v. Wade. So if that's going away, then Scott Jensen's position on abortion becomes much more important. And I will say that we have a voter guide, we will have a voter guide that we'll put together for the election this fall.
We'll
that will
be
have.
Working on it, right?
I will be working on it.
And our policy director will be working on it too.
So that's something that we do every election, and it's a huge deal. If you want copies for your church, let us know, because we provide them for free. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge service. We disseminate thousands of copies every election. And
where can they go to request that?
Right now, there's no place to go to request it, but you can email us, and we'll make sure that you're on the list.
And then soon we will have like a little space on our website to request it, right?
Yeah,
as
we
elections
will.
Draw near.
Yep. And so we won't have just the candidates for governor, but also the candidates for your state senate and state house, and everybody who's up for state elections.
That's great.
This fall. So that's awesome.
That's super good. Honestly, it's helpful even for me. And I've worked on the voter guide several years, and I think I'm going to be working on it somewhat again this year. But even for me, like, it's helpful, because I can just see, okay, this is how this person voted, this is how that person voted, this is their position on this view. It's great. Otherwise, I'd have to go in and like do all the research and put it into a Google Doc or put it into a spreadsheet. So love the voter guide. Moses, going back to the GOP convention, though, what do you make of Mike Murphy, who was another candidate for governor? What do you make of him calling out Kendall Qualls and calling him he called Kendall Qualls a sellout. What do you make of that? And then he endorsed Jensen.
Yeah, so there's all sorts of drama here, and
right.
It's a question of
politics.
Of who you believe. So Mike Murphy's the mayor of Lexington, Minnesota, running for governor, kind of a small town, kind of outsider, kind of a race. And he said that Kendall Qualls had offered him the position of lieutenant governor if he would endorse Qualls. And Qualls later denied that, and Murphy said, "You're a sellout," and endorsed Jensen. Now, it seems from what we can know now that no offer of that type was actually made to Murphy, as far as we can tell. We don't know. Even though he was reading out texts in front of the whole convention purporting to prove that some type of offer was made. But yeah, that was crucial in moving people who supported Murphy over to supporting Jensen rather than Qualls. So it's interesting how close these things ultimately end up being, and how they really are chosen by the people who are there in the convention. The delegates who really get involved in the process. Of course, they're not paid to be there, and that's really whatever party you are a part of, get involved at the local level, because you will be involved in making changes that really matter.
Yeah, that's a good point. So now I just want to pose the question honestly to both of us of what we think Jensen's chances of winning against Walz are. And I know this is pretty far out, right? He just got nominated to be the Republican nominee for governor. Jensen did, but still, I feel like we can still have a preliminary conversation about this. My first impressions, I will say, I've met Jensen in person, and my impressions of him just as a person are great. He's very kind, he's very amiable.
He seems like a friendly doctor.
Yeah, because he is a doctor, friendly doctor. He seems very pro-family. He seemed very interested in my life too, which was very kind, and I think that's something that's really appealing for those of you that have met him in person. He's just, the first thing he said to me after being introduced and saying hi was tell me a little bit about yourself, that's really cool coming from a political candidate, honestly, because
Yeah.
I talked to a few others and it was not that way. So it's cool that he like asked about me, and that again brings in like the doctor vibes, because I feel like that when I go to a doctor's office, they're kind of like, "How are you doing?" And so it
Right.
kind of, he's very personable, is what I'm trying to say. And so I feel
it would
like
be so funny if you went into a doctor's office and the doctor came and said, "Grace, my lower back really hurts."
that would be funny.
And you're like,
Well, I'm here to talk to you about my headaches.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I think he really...
Principal among them being me, right?
If you meet him in person, I think that he'd be very appealing to suburban moms, to parents in general, and even just to teenagers, honestly, because he has that just atmosphere of like caring about you. And I think even he is anti-vax mandate. And I think even being anti-vax mandate does resonate with a lot of parents in Minnesota, because they don't want that mandated for their kids. They want it to be an option, but they don't want it to be required.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those are some things he has going for him. I think the fact that he is outspokenly pro-life, and that's part of his campaign platform, actually won't go back to bite him. I think it'll actually boost him. I think it's good that he's showing his true colors, so to speak, because he's going to get that pro-life vote, whereas if he hid that down, I think people might be a little bit more confused. So I think those are some things that are good about him. And he doesn't come across as like Trumpian, if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't come across as like that brash, tweets out angrily. He seems like kind, pro-family, just... what's the word? Personable. Again, personable.
Personable. That's a good word. I think one thing that's interesting is I think that if you ask people nationally, he's probably more famous than Tim Walz, because Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota, which is, cool. And Minnesota is one of the 50 states. But Scott Jensen really became prominent during the COVID-19 pandemic as a doctor who was really skeptical of the mainstream processes. He's skeptical of the vaccines themselves, and certainly against mandates. And that, whatever your positions on that is, obviously there are a lot of people who feel that way and were really... and he had these videos where he was just explaining in the personable way that you alluded to, is explaining his positions, and his videos are getting millions of views.
Yeah.
He's got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of likes, of followers on Facebook and so forth. So if you look at nationally, he's much more well known than Tim Walz.
That's a really good point.
But the latest polling shows that although he is of the Republican candidates, this is a poll taken before the convention, he was the closest to Walz in the polls. I think he was still about 6 points behind. If the election were held today, type of thing, I think it was something like 53-47 or 53-46 in terms of for Walz, and that's for a Republican in Minnesota. That's pretty good. What we're hoping, of course, is that those numbers would narrow for Jensen, or we probably should say that the governor's primary for the Republican nomination is not quite done. There's one candidate, Rich Stanek, who has not dropped out, and he was not at the convention, I don't think. He's recovering from a car accident.
Oh,
so,
wow. Was it serious?
I think it was relatively serious.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's the former sheriff of Hennepin County. He's running. He has not announced if he's going to keep running, I think. But if he does, then there'll be a primary later this summer. So whoever the candidate is, we're obviously hopeful for a pro-life victory, pro-family victory, and I think we still have the best chance in a generation.
Yeah.
With either of those candidates.
Yeah, it's been pretty encouraging. So, Moses, can I ask you another question about the GOP convention? So there's another race going on, Moses. Tell us what's going on in Congressional District 1 with Jennifer Carnahan.
Oh, my goodness. So, actually, this technically didn't happen at the convention. The convention is for the state candidates. Jennifer Carnahan is the widow of Congressman Jim Hagedorn, who passed away, sadly, a month or 2 months ago or so. And so there needs to be a special election to fill his seat. And the candidate is chosen at the Congressional District Convention. So each congressional district in Minnesota has their own convention, rather than at the state convention.
Gotcha.
And there's three candidates vying, Brad Finstad, Jeremy Munson, and Jennifer Carnahan. Finstad and Munson are both I guess I would call them relatively normal conservative people. Whereas Jennifer Carnahan is, she's the former chairwoman of the Minnesota GOP, and she was kicked out because of her friendship with Tony Lazzaro, who was a big GOP donor who turned out to be a sex trafficker. So that was not good. And we covered that on the podcast last year. So now Jennifer Carnahan is running to fill her late husband's seat. The drama has really escalated from there because she's been sued by her parents, her in-laws. She's been sued by her sister-in-law, and it just seems so clear that that her family did not see her as someone who was a good influence in Congressman Hagedorn's life, which is really sad. And she's alleged to have stolen money from the family, or not paid back money that the family had lent for cancer treatment that was never repaid. And it's just a really sad situation. And then she is now saying that Congressman Hagedorn wanted her to be his replacement and did not want Jeremy Munson to run for his seat after he died. So it's a very dramatic, kind of a sad saga, and the dates are coming up soon. So if you live in the 1st District, which is Rochester, Austin, Albert Lee, the southern suburbs of the Twin Cities, some of them, you'll have a chance to choose to choose who is the Republican candidate, and that's coming up soon. So there'll be a special election, I think, in August, and then another election in November. So it's going to be crazy because of the untimely death of Congressman Hagedorn. Mm-hmm. So just an absolutely crazy story, really, and we'll keep you informed. Mm-hmm. So, Grace, as we come to the end of our podcast, I want to restart a feature that we had on the podcast a while ago.
And I just want to say to our audience, it was my idea to restart it, but Moses is acting like it was his idea to restart it right now.
That's true. I miss doing it too. As soon as Grace suggested it, I was like, I need to claim that this was my idea.
So that happens all the time. Just using. Yeah, but Moses, what are you reading?
Oh, okay. You're gonna put it on me first. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. I'm reading 2 different books right now. Okay. My wife and I are reading Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, which is a novel from the 1800s, a Victorian novel, and it's a really well-known story. It's very sad. It's incredibly well written so far. We're not too far in. Okay. And then my audiobook right now is called Phineas Redux by Anthony Trollope, which is another Victorian novel, and it's about politics. It's a novel about politics in Victorian Britain. And the book I just finished was called State of Emergency, and it was a nonfiction book about British politics.
A politician, if I ever did see one, if he ever runs for office, we have seen the roots taking place.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I would be more at home in the British system because as a historian, that's what I've studied. And yeah. Anyway, so that's what I'm reading.
That's a lot of books.
Really enjoyable. Yeah. What about you?
I have to say, Moses, I really like stalking you on Goodreads because you're always reading cool things and they're always unique. For me, okay, so I just got through finals. So what I was reading was I was rereading stuff for finals. So I read Basil the Great's on the Holy Spirit. Have you read that? I feel like you probably read. Oh, it was really good. Wow. It was like on the person of the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit illumines.
Did McLaughlin assign that?
No, he did not. But shout out to James McLaughlin if he ever listens to this. One of my favorite profs. This was my doctrine professor. So I reread that. Well, I skimmed it for the final because I was pretty sure.
Basil the Great? Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
That's a great name.
Yeah, I know.
If you can get it.
So I recently skimmed that, and I'm not a systematic theologian, but it still was really good. And now I'm about to start my summer fiction reading. I love fiction. I do a lot of academic reading normally.
Her favorite book is The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks, followed closely by A Walk to Remember.
Well, that's not true. Favorite books of all time would be definitely Chronicles of Narnia. And yes, I'm a nerdy homeschooler, but it's just so good.
It is so
not good. Nicholas Sparks. You're making me sound like like everyone who listens to this and respects me is now going to be like,
Unless they like Nicholas Sparks. Plenty of people love Nicholas Sparks.
Anyways, my plan is to read
I cried when I watched A Walk to Remember.
Toxic masculinity. He keeps interrupting me, putting words in my mouth, and making me look a certain way when I'm really not. But I'm about to start rereading Harry Potter this weekend. Yes, I am. Love the series. So good. I'm just so pumped, honestly. It's so exciting. So that's what I'll be reading.
So good.
Make sure you guys remember to stay tuned for our voter guide. We will keep you informed of the facts so that you can stand for truth in the upcoming elections. Again, we will soon have a whole part of our website dedicated to that. But for now, if you'd like to request those early, you can email moses@mfc.org. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning into the Family Beacon podcast. I'm Grace Evans. This is Moses Bratchard, and we will see you next week. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.